Los Angeles, 1969 CBS television city late in the evening when the parking lot is already packed with black sedans and studio executives who move quietly between buildings watched closely by private security posted at every entrance, checking names, credentials, and faces, making sure nothing unexpected slips through. Inside, a small green room has been sealed off from the rest of the studio, reserved for a handful of people whose presence alone changes the atmosphere of the building. Steve McQueen stands near the wall, calm and observant at the height of his career, not here to perform, but to watch. Only minutes earlier, Bruce Lee had finished a martial arts demonstration on stage for an upcoming television special, a performance that looked flawless under the lights, fast-controlled, impressive enough to earn applause from the audience, and approval from the producers, watching from their seats. Backstage, the reaction is different. Near the doorway, McQueen's head of security watches in silence, a man whose size alone fills the room, built for confrontation, shaped by years of believing that real authority comes from mass pressure and the ability to end problems without finesse, a man who has seen countless fighters rely on speed and technique, only to fail when reality stopped playing along. Across the room, Bruce Lee removes a towel from his shoulders and rolls his neck slowly, his breathing steady, his movements unhurried, as if nothing important has just happened, as if the demonstration meant nothing once the lights went out. To the bodyguard, that calm reads as weakness. What he sees is not a fighter, but a performance that belongs on television, something designed to impress an audience rather than survive real resistance. And in his world, performances collapse the moment they are tested. He steps forward, not with anger, not with excitement, but with certainty, the kind that comes from never having been wrong before, already convinced that whatever happens next will only confirm what he believes to be true. He isn't trying to start a fight. He's trying to answer a question. What people in that room were reacting to had very little to do with fighting. Hollywood understood performance because performance could be framed, edited, and sold, while martial arts schools understood form and hierarchy because form created order, lineage, and authority. But what stood in front of them that night didn't fit either system in a way anyone could comfortably name. Bruce Lee had already learned this lesson years earlier. On television, he was expected to move a certain way to slow things down, just enough for the camera to keep up to exaggerate technique so it looked impressive rather than efficient. While in traditional martial arts circles, he was expected to respect styles, ranks, and boundaries that had been in place. Long before he arrived, he did neither. Bruce Lee had a habit that made institutions uneasy. He asked questions they couldn't answer, and worse, he stopped following rules once they stopped making sense to him. He wasn't interested in preserving tradition for its own sake, and he had no patience for spectacle that collapsed the moment pressure was applied. To Hollywood executives, that made him unpredictable. To martial arts traditionalists, it made him dangerous. He wasn't fully accepted by the studios because what he did didn't always look good on camera, and he wasn't embraced by the old schools because what he taught quietly suggested that many of their rules were optional, not sacred. In rooms like this one, men trusted size, titles, and reputation because those things had always protected them before, and Bruce Lee represented something uncomfortable, a way of moving through the world that didn't rely on any of those markers to work. That was the real reason people watched him so closely. Not because they admired him, but because they couldn't place him. And when someone cannot be placed inside a system, the system eventually tries to test him. The bodyguard doesn't announce himself. He doesn't ask permission, and he doesn't look towards Steve McQueen for approval, because in his experience, moments like this never require discussion, they require pressure, and pressure has always done the talking for him. He crosses the room slowly, deliberately placing himself between Bruce Lee and the door close enough now that the imbalance in size is impossible to ignore, close enough that the intention becomes clear without a single word being spoken. The room tightens. People nearby stop what they're doing not because anything violent has happened yet, but because they recognize the posture of a man who has already decided how this will end, a man who believes the outcome is mathematics, not chance. Across from him, Bruce Lee doesn't step back. He doesn't raise his hands, doesn't shift into anything that resembles a fighting stance, and doesn't mirror the tension building in front of him, choosing instead to remain exactly as he is, balanced, relaxed, and unremarkable, as if the space between them carries no significance at all. That, more than anything else, irritates the bodyguard. He has seen fear, bravado, hesitation, and false confidence, but he has never seen someone stand this calmly in a moment designed to provoke reaction, and so he does what men like him always do when calm refuses to acknowledge authority. He commits. The strike comes fast for someone his size, driven by habit and confidence, aimed to end the uncertainty in a single motion. But before the thought can fully register in his mind, the target he was aiming for is no longer there in the way he expected it to be. There is no dramatic evasion, no exaggerated movement, only a slight change in angle, subtle enough that most of the room doesn't immediately understand what they're seeing, followed by the unmistakable sound of a body losing balance and meeting the floor with force. The impact is heavy. The room goes silent. For a brief moment, no one moves because what just happened doesn't match the sequence their brains were prepared to process. And when the bodyguard tries to rise, instinct driving him upward, he finds that the situation has already changed. Again, Bruce Lee is standing over him, not pressing, not striking, not celebrating. Simply present his foot, resting lightly against the man's chest, as if marking a boundary, rather than enforcing a victory. The message is clear enough without being spoken. This is over. The bodyguard doesn't understand how he got there. And that confusion is exactly the point. What follows is not applause, not outrage, and not even confrontation, but a kind of silence that settles over the room when something happens that no one knows how to categorize because there is no rule for it and no language prepared in advance. There will be no report written that night, no official acknowledgement, no story fed to the press, because moments like this don't belong to institutions. They exist only in memory passed quietly between people who were close enough to feel the shift in the air when it happened. For Bruce Lee, this is nothing new. Every system he has encountered reacts the same way when it fails to contain him. Hollywood prefers what can be repeated, rehearsed, and controlled, while traditional martial arts prefer what can be ranked, certified, and traced through lineage. And Bruce Lee offers neither comfort. He doesn't fit the camera the way they want him to, and he doesn't fit the hierarchy the way others expect him to, which means he is tolerated, admired from a distance, but never fully trusted. What happened in that green room doesn't make him more accepted. It does the opposite. Men who rely on structure don't like what they can't predict, and Bruce Lee has built his entire approach around removing predictability from the equation, even when it isolates him, even when it costs him opportunities, even when it turns admiration into quiet unease. There is a price for refusing to belong. It means no system will stand up for you when questions are asked, and no institution will claim responsibility when stories begin to circulate, stripped of context and distorted by disbelief, leaving only fragments that people repeat without ever fully understanding. Bruce Lee walks away from moments like this unchanged, but the world around him does not, because once a system sees its limits exposed, it doesn't forget the experience. It remembers. And it adjusts. Years later, people would argue about what made Bruce Lee extraordinary, pointing to his speed, his power, his discipline, or the techniques he demonstrated on screen, because those were the parts that could be filmed, explained, and copied at least on the surface. What they rarely talked about was what couldn't be packaged. Bruce Lee didn't leave behind a style in the traditional sense, because styles harden over time and become predictable, and he had no interest in creating something that would eventually trap others the way systems had tried to trap him. What he left behind was a way of seeing. He understood that the moment someone commits fully to a single method, a single assumption, or a single idea of how things are supposed to work, they also commit to its limitations, and from that moment on, they can be read, redirected, and undone. That lesson had nothing to do with fighting. It applied to Hollywood, where roles were assigned before talent was understood, to martial arts, where tradition often mattered more than effectiveness, and to life itself, where most people cling to familiar structures, even when those structures no longer serve them. Bruce Lee didn't confront systems head-on. He moved around them. He didn't try to dominate, impress, or convert everyone in the room because he knew that understanding cannot be forced, only revealed, usually in moments when certainty collapses and something quieter takes its place. That is why so many people misunderstood him while he was alive, and why so many continue to misunderstand him now, mistaking the surface for the substance and the performance for the principle. The real legacy of Bruce Lee was not how he fought, but how he refused to be confined by the rules others never thought to question. And the uncomfortable question he left behind is this: if someone like him appeared today, would we recognize what we were seeing, or would we dismiss it just as easily? because it didn't look the way we expected it to.